È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Prestare il proprio tempo per il bene comune è un valore prezioso che va sostenuto e tutelato. Da sempre, vicini a enti religiosi e non profit. Contatta subito i nostri agenti.
Vi prego, vi imploro, con umiltà e con fiducia, permettete a Cristo di parlare all'uomo.
Don Gius aveva capito il problema che avevo. Se la tua vocazione è vero, il tuo lavoro verrà fuori anche dai sassi.
Di comunicare la fede agli altri, ma veramente insieme a loro riscoprire che cos'è la fede, che cos'è la fede per me. Portare Cristo agli altri, comunicarlo agli altri è l'unico modo che abbiamo per conoscerlo veramente.
L'iter communionis aiuta a comunicare all'esterno la ricchezza di vita, di giudizi, di tentativi, di opere che nascono dalle persone e dalle comunità. L'iter communionis è proprio la vita del movimento. Scrivete all'iter communionis le vostre esperienze, ci fate bene. Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Prestare il proprio tempo per il bene comune è un valore prezioso che va sostenuto e tutelato. Da sempre, vicini a enti religiosi e non profit. Contatta subito i nostri agenti.
Vi prego, vi imploro, con umiltà e con fiducia, permettete a Cristo di parlare all'uomo.
Don Gius aveva capito il problema che avevo. Se la tua vocazione è vero, il tuo lavoro verrà fuori anche dai sassi.
Di comunicare la fede agli altri, ma veramente insieme a loro riscoprire che cos'è la fede, che cos'è la fede per me. Portare Cristo agli altri, comunicarlo agli altri è l'unico modo che abbiamo per conoscerlo veramente.
L'iter communionis aiuta a comunicare all'esterno la ricchezza di vita, di giudizi, di tentativi, di opere che nascono dalle persone e dalle comunità. L'iter communionis è proprio la vita del movimento. Scrivete all'iter communionis le vostre esperienze, ci fate bene. Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Prestare il proprio tempo per il bene comune è un valore prezioso che va sostenuto e tutelato. Da sempre, vicini a enti religiosi e non profit. Contatta subito i nostri agenti.
Vi prego, vi imploro, con umiltà e con fiducia, civiltà dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buongiorno.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session entitled The Single Market, Euro National Recovery and Resilience Plan, What Economic Development for the EU. Those of you who were with us at the meeting have seen that Europe has been one of the hot topics of the meeting. We had the governor of the Bank of Italy, Banetta, talking about the relation between Italy and Europe. EU Commissioner Gentiloni talked about EU labor. Then there was a session with the members of parliament. And now we have a very qualified panel, which is quite varied. And with them, we will focus on this topic in detail. I'll introduce the panelists in alphabetical order. Piero Cipollone, Executive Committee member of the European Central Bank. Raffaele Fitto, Minister for European Affairs, the South, Cohesion Policies, and the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, and Enrico Letta, who has been the author of the strategic report on the European single market. Before introducing the session, I will give the floor to Luca Beccari, Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Political Affairs, Economic Cooperation, and the Digital Transition of the Republic of San Marino. The floor is yours.
Grazie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is always a pleasure for me to be here in my capacity as the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of San Marino. This is my fifth time in a row at the meeting of Rimini. And San Marino has always been cooperating with this wonderful meeting of Rimini. We have a long-standing cooperation. I remember very well the first time I came here in 2020. After the first wave of the COVID-19, that was a very special edition where we started to discuss about European development after COVID. Then we came out of this tragedy, and we dived into an even more complex geopolitical context with the tensions in our region, where war has come back after many decades, and stability and safety are increasingly important topics. The good side is that we also started to talk about development in a new way. We have started to talk about resilience, adaptation to change, resistance to all the different shocks. And we have increasingly started to talk about cooperation. Against this background, the Republic of San Marino participated in this debate, and two very important events in the relation between San Marino and the EU have happened, and they have a positive impact on the relation between San Marino and Italy. The first is the conclusion of the negotiation for the association agreement that hopefully will soon be signed, and therefore San Marino will integrate into the common market. So it will become part and parcel of this wonderful economic and social platform. San Marino has already been using the euro for years, so we are already in the common market in terms of currency. We will not participate in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, so we're not going to receive any EU money. But we are already participating in the planning together with European and non-European entities, and Italy in particular, and the countries from the Adriatic-Ionian Initiative. So this is a new context, and there is a new political integration with the EU, thanks to our participations in the European Political Conference, which is the new format for political debate in the European region, including not just the 27 EU member states, but also all the countries having formal relations with the EU. This panel definitely provides three important elements, underline integration and cooperation. Despite all the problems and what seem to be a very complicated times, Europe has most definitely become aware that there is not only a EU of 27 member states, but there are also other countries with a partnerships agreement and countries that are on the verge of joining the EU. Countries, therefore, that need to have better synergies to take on common challenges. Inflation, the quality of life of citizens, the need for investments, and the need to facilitate exchanges are problems that are common to us all. Thank you very much. So, as I said, we have three distinguished guests. They have decisive roles Enrico Letta wrote this report and wrote this wonderful book, Molto più di un mercato, much more than a market, that I recommend you to read to understand about how EU is functioning. Cipollone is member of the European Central Bank, and Raffaele Fitto has been participating in the drafting of the National Recovery Plan. So I will give them the floor. Let me just give you some introductory information. So the topic of European Union is always debated in a very strict sense. You remember about Fukuyama, then we have a new worldwide balance, and now we have a bipolar imbalance, so to speak, where Europe has to find its own role. It's not just an economic role, but first and foremost, a political and military role. What's going to happen with that, given the situation in the U.S., in China, and in Russia, and the wars? So this is going to be the first question. What's going to be the role of the EU? Even because Europe was born on the idea to overcome the war, especially in the European continent. If you read the Gasperi speeches in the exhibition here at the meeting, Europe was born out of countries that were at war with one another, whose relatives and friends had been killed by other countries. Today, the war has come back to European soil. There was already war in the Balkans. Now there is still war on European soil, although this is not the European Union. So the second question concerns the war. And then there's going to be a third question, as in what are the social, environmental, and technological challenges for sustainability? The last two legislators, von der Leyen and her initial speech in a new mandate, have focused once again on sustainability. To many of us, the word sustainability is very abstract. It relates to the green, to development. And then there is artificial intelligence. Europe has been one of the first continents to try and make a bill on artificial intelligence. So, economy is not isolated from anything else, but it is floating in a sea that is continuously changing. And it is interesting to understand how we can deal with this situation. So Europe was born on ideals. It was clever enough to be born on coal and steel, on the sources of energy, which are usually a source of clash. So what does it mean to redesign Europe right now? Even because it is not clear what Europe has to be like. Some people say that the European Parliament must increase in role, as well as the Commission and the heads of government. As there is no constitution, governance has yet to be decided upon. And then what must relations among states be like? because now we have a unanimous vote, which sometimes prevent from making decisions, but we also have countries, governments, states that are afraid of losing independence and autonomy on some topics. So these are not simple questions to our panelists. So the situation is not very clear. I admire the three of them because they have played different roles and they are used to speaking to other countries. And now they have to deal with these topics and a situation which is far from being clear. So I'm going to ask you different questions. The first question goes to Enrico Letta. What does this report on the common market focus on? What type of common market are we talking about, and how can that help to European integration? All the people who came here at the meeting, even Panetta, surprisingly enough, said that nothing is possible without Europe. And as Enrico always says, Italy was a great country in a small world. Now it is a small country in a big world. The floor is yours. Thank you, Giorgio, and thank you to the meeting for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you, Raffaele and Piero. With both of them, I've been working, and I want to thank them warmly for our friendly relations and for this report. Now, the methodology underlying this report has been essential to understand why and what we need to do today to overcome the constraints that are posing problems to Europe. I wrote the report by listening a lot. I had 400 meetings in 65 European cities, 27 countries that I visited, and 8 months of meetings, of exchange. Many of them were held in Italy. So I went through this journey, and I'll talk to you about this experience that I had. I thought that at the beginning that I had to visit 27 countries. I had little time. If I had done that in Italy, I would have used high-speed trains because we have high-speed trains in Italy. So I would have used them. So I wanted to do the same in Europe, even because there is high-speed trains in France, in Spain, in Germany. But I realized that it is impossible in Europe to plan a journey among European capitals by using high-speed trains because there is no high-speed train among European capitals. High-speed trains can connect different cities in the different regions of the same countries, but not European capitals. And this shows the problem that we have today. Countries are too much divided. Each country is focusing on its own problems, but we're not connected, and this lack of connection creates enormous damage. And I'll give you two examples coming out of the lack of connection. And I want to thank the European Central Bank because this data came out of the European Central Bank studies. Just to think about financial markets, they seem to be very far from us, but they are important. If financial markets are not effective, economy doesn't work. If financial markets are not properly managed, the economy goes bad. United States is much better than us today because its financial market has a very strong financial market, exploiting the fact that Europe is fragmented. Savings, European savings, end up in Wall Street. Why? Because Wall Street is big integrated and much more profitable because it is big and integrated. Nasdaq is worth twice as much as all the European stock exchanges together. Just think about the difference. So European savings end up in Wall Street. And therefore, they are transformed into shares in Wall Street, and these shares strengthened U.S. companies, which then come back to Europe with our money to buy European companies. Fragmentation and national flags reason out of nationalism, which is totally useless, have a negative impact. And then I'll give you another example of fragmentation. Europe is a continent of peace and has a peace project, but Europe must also be a major tool for defense. Just go and visit the Gasperi's exhibition. The last days of the Gasperi's life, in his last days, he was very bitter because he realized that the European project of defense was doomed to failure. He realized that that European of defense did not exist. We all helped Ukraine. We spent 140 billion euros in Europe to help Ukraine. And we have to continue helping the Ukraine to defend itself. But since European defense is fragmented, with that money, we bought non-European equipment, and with European money of European taxpayers, we created jobs in Turkey, South Korea, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. This is totally absurd, even because others are not doing the same. Americans spent the same amount of money, but they bought U.S. equipment and they created jobs in the United States, not in Europe. Because of our fragmentation, Europe is lagging behind. It is fighting against its own interests. So we need to integrate more in all key sectors. And I identified the three of them plus one. The three of them are the major sectors that were left outside integration: telecom, energy, and financial services. Plus one, defense. We need to have more integration in those sectors to be more effective, to create jobs, and to be competitive worldwide. Otherwise, as is already happening in telecommunications, Europe is going to become a land of conquer for the US and China. The future of Europe must not be whether to decide whether we want to be a U.S. colony, an American colony, or a Chinese colony. Giorgio said that Italy, but we could also say the same about France and the major European countries, big world and small country. Our generations lived the major change of the history of mankind, the rise of China and the rise of India. 1.5 billion people that were completely outside history, but now they're just becoming like us. And there's just 60 million people in Italy, and there's 3 billion people all of a sudden entered history. I'll give you another example that you will like, Giorgio. When we talk about China, think about that the Olympic Games, the United States and China were fighting to rank first. 40 golden medals for China and for the United States. It was a fight until the end. It was a battle until the end. The United States have always taken 35, 40, 50 golden medals. You know how many golden medals has China taken when the common market was born? Just 5. Over 30 years, 35 years, China before ranked the 30th country in winning golden medals, and now it's the first one. And this has changed. The change also relates to the speed of change. How many of us every day are defending the made in Italy and the made in Europe, but then if we have to spend our own money, we go to Chinese shops, Chinese stores, and we buy products for 50 cents. And these products are lower in quality, but are competing with others. But we buy them because they're much cheaper, because they can build them for nothing. To conclude, what are the proposals that I tabled in my report? To integrate the three sectors, telecommunications, energy, and financial services. Not only to be more competitive, but also to ensure security. How can Europe be secure if Europe is not independent in energy? How can Europe be secure if it has a weak financial market and if there is no connectivity? The world of telecommunications was governed by Europe in the 1980s. All the 1980 and 1990 brands were from Europe. GSM was from Europe. Now the 5G is either American or Chinese. All platforms are either Chinese or American, because Europe is still divided into 27 member states. What is the average number of customers of one American telecommunication operators, or one from China and one from Europe? Do you know that? 460 million is the average number of customers for China, 407 million for U.S. operators, and the average number for European operators, number of customers, is only 5 million. So you can imagine that European operators have no money to invest in artificial intelligence in telecommunications, and this is due to fragmentation. So the European flag has to be used in those sectors, not out of ideology, but because we have to be stronger. Joining our forces, our European forces, is going to be a great asset for all of us. So we need to unite in the three sectors, just like in defense. Otherwise, we will never be able to transform all the money invested in defense in projects providing jobs to Europeans. Projects so that the Made in Europe is going to win without having to transfer production to Turkey, Korea, or the United States. Giorgio talked about sustainability. Let me follow up on that. Sustainability has always been a hot topic at the meeting, especially this year. For the next European Commission over the next 5 years, what's going to be the hot topic? In my opinion, the hot topic is going to be to answer the following question. How can we find 500 billion euros every year to finance a green and digital transition? Because over the next 10 years, there's going to be a transition. Transition is needed because this is required by the health of our planet and by our children and by our future. But transition needs to be financed. Otherwise, we will have the situation that I've heard from Spanish entrepreneurs, from Polish farmers and Italian entrepreneurs. They all said to me that they know that we want to have the transition, but it's very expensive. So it means that they will have to pay for the transformation, or workers in the automotive industry will have to pay a price for that. So my proposal is for a union of savings and investments, where we can put together private investments, savings with a higher interests and public money, so that together we can answer to the question. If so, a transition is going to be possible. Otherwise, Europe will go against the interests of its citizens, and this is going to be an enormous problem. Let me conclude with one last remark. One of the reasons why we lag behind compared to the U.S. is that the U.S. has decided to invest significantly in innovation recently. All major innovations come from the U.S. today because the U.S. has the money to do it and has the culture based on innovation. I met young start-uppers in recent months around Europe, and this is a story I told in my book. And each one of them, not just from Italy, but also from other countries, each one of the young start-uppers from Finland, Portugal, and Ireland said that their dream is to go to the United States to develop their ideas, projects, and initiatives, because they can find funds in the U.S. and the right context. So we need to prompt a radical change on the common market. The common market has also been called the market of four freedoms: movement, capitals, movement, and services. These four freedoms date back to the 20th century. They are all tangible. This is an old-style economy. We need to include the fifth freedom, the freedom of innovation, research, and competencies, as in the ability to go towards the intangible. If not, we will lag even more behind, and we will not be successful. So I was very quick. You can find all the details in the report and summarized in the book. But here, my report aims at giving a very strong message, conveying a very strong message to European governments. We no longer have time. We're lagging more and more behind, and we're becoming more and more marginal in Europe. Either we integrate in order to be more competitive and performing, or else we will have to decide whether to be an American colony or a Chinese colony. I don't want my children to grow up with this option. I want Italian children to grow up thinking that Europe is a continent, and a continent of values, solidarity, where social cohesion and social justice, as told by De Gasperi, are the great engagement, the greatest engagement of European politics. This is the Europe that we need to build up, and that I'm sure we are going to build. Thank you. And now I want to ask Piero Cipollone, as a member of the European Central Bank Board, to what extent the integration of economies and the common currency is a factor for growth. Because usually people are pointing and blaming the European Central Bank, but they don't understand the role that it has.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Giorgio, for the invitation. It's a great honor to join the meeting, and in particular to join this panel that occurs in very delicate times, especially about what is happening in Brussels and about what is happening for the building of the new Commission. So, well, I think that the European integration, the single market, and the single currency have been a great success. And this is just to start my answer to your question. And well, I can give, there are several studies proving this, but I mean, the per capita salary in Europe would have been much lower without a single currency, and this is just enough of a proof. But economists like to give us figures. But, I mean, figures sometimes are not so useful if then people do not perceive things, if then people do not perceive the reality hidden behind those figures. So we should also listen to what people say about Europe, and I think that this confirms what I just said. I looked at the data of the Eurobarometer that makes polls all over Europe. It's an entity dealing with this. So according to 2024 Eurobarometer data, 86% of EU citizens today say that they had never been so happy with the EU as today. This is the lowest rate since 1974. But the interesting thing is that this rate has always been growing, And the same is true for the single currency. So 70% of the EU citizens think that the introduction of euro was good for the whole area. This rate was much lower at the beginning. It was 53% in 1992, and it was 61% when the euro was actually adopted. So when it comes to the euro perception, we can say that it was a big success because the appreciation grew over time. And in particular, people think that the euro currency has been extremely good for Europe as a whole, and not specifically for single countries. But if we were to ask the same questions to the citizens that did not introduce the euro, they think that it was a good thing for the countries that introduced it. And 57% of citizens that did not adopt the euro would be ready to get it. Well, this change of mind, did not happen out of the blue. There were specific facts that made people change their mind over the last 5 years. For instance, what happened with the Brexit and the pandemic and the response that Europe was able to give with the Next Generation EU on the one hand and with the other EU measures. And then the wars in Ukraine and Gaza were major events that changed people's minds. But certainly there's a growing need of integration. And this had an impact also on the representation. I mean, those who used to think something politically and maybe thought that going out of Europe was good, well, they've changed their mind. Well, maybe now Euroscepticism seems to be, diminishing. All in all, there were big successes, but sometimes the success of the past doesn't guarantee the success of the future. So the question was, what's the European role and what will guarantee the success of our economies? I think that Europe should respond to 3 major questions. First of all, the integration process and the reinforcement of this integration will go on only if we were able to take up challenges such as the ecological digital transitions and the reinforcement of the economic and physical defense of the old continent. So these are the challenges we should take up. But then what should we do? What should we do in order to cope with these challenges? Well, I always look at money because I work for the European Central Bank. So we have the strength, we need the money. Where can we find the money we need? First of all, we need to realize what we are talking about, because, I mean, figures are always very clear. Some weeks ago, the BCE colleagues tried to make calculations about the cost of digital and military transitions according to specific estimations of the Commission and NATO. Their estimate is that between 2025 and 2031, we will have to invest 5.4 thousand billions. Where are we going to find this money? Well, in their opinion, well, we will get some of that from public funds and part of that from the EU. So 900 million from national funds and European funds, but the large majority should come from private investments. And we are talking about 4,100 billions. So which are the conditions to find this money? The governor told us that, for instance, a specific European common strategy in this field would be useful, but then we also need to reduce the deficits, and the governor was very clear about that, because Italy spend too much for the debt, for the deficit, and it spends as much as it spends for the education system. So financing this transition seems to be pretty tough. So we need to involve private partners. But how can we do that? Right, there are two aspects to be considered. First of all, we need to generate more resources on the one hand, and better use the ones we have. So the only way to create new resources is to grow. But as President Letta said, grow is not easy, and the growth won't be great over the next few years. Why? Because demography and productivity, well, are not going that well, are not evolving as they should. I just want to give you some figures about demography. I had a look at all Eurostat estimates. So for the next 5 years, if we always keep in mind this 5-year period, because this will be the period covered by the next Commission, so the EU population will remain stable around 450,000 million people. The people being active will go down to 6 million people, 6.2%. The even younger ones, so future workers, those with less than 19 years of age, will go by 4.4%, and it won't be better after 2030. Instead, it will get worse. So we need to find the available people who can work. Eurostat already considers immigration, so this has already been taken into account. Well, two ways are possible in order to keep the same per capita salary. So to keep producing the same resources, we can either increase the number of people working or improve their productivity. So increasing the number of working people is the sort of choice that we have chosen. And we must say that on an average, the average salary has been growing of 8 percentage points recently, in line with the growth of the US salary. But still, I think that this won't radically change the perspective. So productivity could be the way. And a minute ago, President Letta said it. And as to productivity, there are serious issues. Over the last 30 years, the productivity in the EU area went up by 2/3, much more than the US. But still, we still lag behind. And the gap has been growing over the last few years. And this has to do with the efficiency with which we use resources. I don't want to say longer about what can be done to speed up the growth. But if you have a look at the report written by Professor Letta, you will find plenty of info and suggestions. The problem is then to put them into practice. Right, so the main issue is how can we better use the resources we have to finance these major challenges? I think that there are at least a few figures to better understand things. The first figure is the one mentioned by President Letta. Technically, European financial activities and EU savings invested in other countries account for 480 billion, 4.01% of the GDP. Well, it would be advisable to keep this money in the euro area. Secondly, and this is another very important thing, is how we use this money, these savings. Well, families so have 1/3 of their savings in deposits. So totally they account for 30,000 billion. So yes, it can be a source of financing when the banks then finance with this money their companies. But there could be margins of improvement. So as President Letta said, we can find ways to invest these investments in a more profitable way, and secondly, that are strictly related to the transition being brought about. So, how can we mobilize these resources? Which are the financial tools? How can we improve the structure of financial markets to allow the required investments and also to somehow use them for the most relevant challenges? And also, how can we attract more foreign investments in the EU to invest finance such investments? Some time ago, we published a report that covers the topics I'm referring to. And then at the end, we drew up 3 recommendations that are very similar to the ones indicated in the financial markets chapter in the Letta report. So first of all, we should try to make use of private savings. Secondly, we should have bonds and shares specific markets to make them more attractive, and also we should make the EU stock markets more interesting for investors. So first of all, as BCE, we do 2 things. We try to contribute to this debate in the suitable seats, and the Eurogroup is certainly an example of that. And secondly, we try to implement very functional and useful actions in line with our sort of tasks. First of all, in order to overcome the fragmentation of financial markets, we have always said that we need an integration of both markets and surveillance. And President Lagarde was in favor of this last year. The second recommendation is that we think that Europe needs a common fiscal approach to somehow better finance issues. There is a free riding issue, so underinvestment when it comes to public investments. And we will try to make this heard. Instead, as to what we do, in order to generate the resources we need a different macroeconomic scenario, a more stable one, with inflation under control. So to us, keeping inflation under control below 2% is essential because price stability guarantees long-term planning to companies and households. So this is extremely important. Instead, going back to practical actions having to do with the infrastructure of financial markets, I can say that we are working to reinforce the role of euros, and we are doing that in 3 different directions. First of all, we offer a retail paying system that is in line with the digital age, and we are referring to the digital euro. And this, to us, this is essential to overcome the payment system fragmentation that probably is even more fragmented than the European railway systems and networks. Then we should build up a market infrastructure system suitable for the digital age. We're now referring to digital platform transactions, the DLT, and we are trying to understand how we can turn the current payment systems into something new, into something likely to guide the transformations. And last but not least, we are working in order to connect the EU paying systems with the paying systems of other countries in order to make the transactions safer, cheaper, and more convenient. Right, so the main principles of the EU market are 3: stimulating competition, reinforcing cooperation, and unifying solidarity. We have touched upon them according to the year. This time we should underscore the solidarity, getting things together, because we could be safer, stronger, and freer. Thank you.
A questo punto al Ministro Fitto, come accennavo.
So, Minister Fitto, which is the role played by Italy in this context, considering that, well, this is already being done somehow, because you have already done a lot at European level. So what's the current situation? First of all, thank you.
Thank you, Giorgio. Thank you to the meeting. I come back every year, and I'm very happy with that. And this year, I'm very happy to be here in a panel with Enrico Letta and Piero Cipollone for the contents and for the very topical issues we are discussing. Let me start with an introductory remark. As Enrico Letta recalled, we have been working together in a very positive way, and I want to thank him for the approach that he had with the different European governments, including the Italian government. There are fundamental goals that emerge from this report in terms of the assessment of the main choices in the past 30 years and on the needs for change and adaptation to the new scenario. It is very positive that the report identifies different topics that could not be discussed 30 years ago, but today are very topical. And in my speech, I will also try to focus on what the government has been doing with the European Commission and in the implementation of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, because it is necessary to coordinate all the resources available. Indeed, we cannot fully cover the resources, allocate the resources to implement all the different projects. And as Enrico Letta said, the cost for this transaction is quite high. And we also need to make very important choices, first and foremost, to understand how to best use the resources available so that they can be adapted to new scenarios. We have to react very quickly to what is happening worldwide because our international competitors are fast enough. And we will always lag behind if bureaucracy is too complex. So, as Ursula von der Leyen said in July at the European Parliament during her speech, Europe has to make a choice to reduce bureaucracy and to streamline things. This is necessary for everything. Even in a parliamentary debate, and it is important to recall that, while preparing for the European Council last July, the Prime Minister, Mrs. Meloni, said that this topic was essential. This is one of the fundamental needs for Europe today. And also the strategic competitiveness plan is absolutely vital. And this is shown in the report prepared by Letta. And this is part and parcel of the strategic agenda approved last June by the European Council. And it is also a priority of the future European debate. It is very important to understand a few things. And there are some examples for that. For example, energy or defense. These topics relate to a much wider topic where some mistakes were made in the past. Let's talk about the strategic autonomy, for example. Europe must become competitive with the other international superpowers, and it has to have a comprehensive supply chain on European soil, and there must be an agreement between the European member states. With reference to defense, it is important to be strategically autonomous and independent in Europe so that we have the whole supply chain for defense on European soil. That could be a stronger point for us, and that could strengthen the manufacturing industry in Europe, which has always been a stronger point for Europe. And energy shows that. Since the 22nd of February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the energy dependence on Russia has significantly reduced. However, that has not implied a reduction of energy costs in a coordinated way. And in terms of competitiveness, this is one of the most important points. So we needed to assess that. There was a debate here at the meeting on that, and that was also mentioned by Cipollone. Europe must be able to use the resources available at its best. And this relates to the next generation EU and the National Recovery Plan. The next generation EU has been a form of a common debt, which at dramatic times was shared by all member states. resources have to be found to implement investment projects. But this is a problem. The common debt, which has financed next generation EU, will not be available for other member states in the future. And there is also another problem. That is, a strategic decision must be made on the enlargement of the EU. Enlargement has accelerated for different reasons compared to the past. In the past, the EU enlarged due to strategic reasons, and enlargement choices were the result of the need to look at the geopolitical situation which came about in Europe. Now, it is important to take account of all that. Enlargement cannot be made without taking into account its costs. The same things cannot be done with the same resources in an enlarged Europe. This is not possible. Hence, the need to take into account some measures and policies that today are allocated significant money and have a lot of impact on the competitiveness of our companies. Let's think about agriculture and cohesion, which are the two items that could contribute to the success of the EU. Hence, that is important. So COVID has made us forget many things, but there has been an increase in public expenditure in many member states. Public expenditure has increased significantly, and the quality of this increase is quite questionable. Hence, there is a serious problem, because we can solve the problem of debt in two ways: either reducing non-productive public expenditure, otherwise we would risk having a negative impact on the GDP, or working on growth. Hence, we need to have a good expenditure. We need to have a qualified investment in terms of choices. Positive expenditure can reduce debt, and this strongly relates to the National Recovery Plan. Italy is a country which is strictly monitored because it is a country that has the largest national recovery plan, and together with Greece and Romania, it has fully covered the national recovery plan through debt. So let's remember that out of 194 billion euros resources allocated to the Italian plan, 122 billion euro are covered by the debt. Hence, the quality of expenditure must be good enough. So 220 billion expenditure, total expenditure, with the national plan, another 30 billion euro that were covered by the debt. So at that time, 68 billion euro for existing projects, as in projects that were previously financed for the national before the National Recovery Plan, and they were already part of the Italian debt in terms of budget lines in the state budget. And this from then on, there was an improvement in the public expenditure of Italy. Last year, there was a review of the National Recovery Plan based on two assessments. The first assessment was connected to the international scenario. If the world is changing, Italy must also change. When there was the Ukraine invasion, the European Commission set up the Power EU, a tool to provide an answer to the energy crisis. And member states were given the opportunity to use debts that until then only 3 countries had used, as in Italy, Greece, and Romania. Spain took about 84 billion euro to implement the repower plan. This example shows you the importance of the quality of expenditure and of the work that needs to be done for that. At that time, there were projects that could not be connected to the National Recovery Plan because they couldn't provide an added value, and at the same time, we identified some choices that are in line with the needs identified in the report. Our repower plan, for example, has used some resources that were previously allocated for other projects, and they were quite questionable. So they were replaced with different measures. For example, the government has now implemented a call for the transition 5.0 for companies, making available 6.3 billion euro. And this is in line with the goals we have just mentioned. Then there is an energy problem which does not just concern Italy, but Europe as a whole. And the geopolitical problem of Ukraine makes us think that what we thought for a few decades as in energy supply from Russia had to be replaced by something else, with different policies to reduce our dependence and with stronger investments in renewable energies. Although this is not a long-term solution for development if we really want to be competitive. Hence, the repower has also included some investments in the framework of the Mattei plan, focusing on a strategy for Mediterranean countries, with an idea to implement a new strategy. So, different investments made in energy and gas to strengthen Italian infrastructures, and not only to solve the Italian energy problem, but also the European energy problem, so that Italy can be the natural bridge between Africa and Europe. Africa can give us reason for concern, but is also important in terms of energy supply. So, in this context, we implemented some measures for the cohesion policy. Everyone is talking about the cohesion policy, but it is actually difficult to implement it. In the period 2021-2027, Italy will benefit from 43 billion euro with co-financing for a total of 75 billion euros that will be added to the National Recovery Plan. So, a coordination was needed. All the different policies were coordinated because the National Recovery Plan has its deadline in 2026. The cohesion policy has a deadline in 2029. But these two plans need to be coordinated in order to avoid overlapping and to avoid the clashes between the two plans and to use the resources available in the best possible way. According to the latest report of the European Commission, the cohesion policy is a priority. So we need to focus on the quality of expenditure. I was talking about debt. Debt reduction can go through growth and the reduction in non-productive public expenditure. So the quality of expenditure generates a growth and enables us to reduce debt. And we found we have more than 150 billion additional debt, which unfortunately is one of the bad records for Italy. So the quality of expenditure in the National Recovery Plan is fundamental. So we've been talking a lot about the expenditure of the National Recovery Plan, but not about the reforms of the National Recovery Plan, just as if we only had to spend money. It is also important to consider that reforms are vital because after June 2026, Italy will not have another national recovery plan. So these resources are a lump sum. They must be spent properly for reforms, enabling Italy to start a new journey to the future. When talking about the social justice, criminal justice, public administration, competitiveness, it is important to take that into account. Unfortunately, when talking about the National Recovery Plan, we only focus on expenditure. But there are also many different goals. In those goals, we don't always need to achieve expenditure goals, but there are many others. Therefore, the European Commission needs to approve the results of all the projects that we are implementing to consolidate a system that provides a meaning to the public debt. Public debt has to be transformed into positive growth. This is the only way to work on some strategic plans, such as defense or competitiveness. We can come up maybe with another tool which is similar to the Next Generation EU in order to achieve practical results. The National Recovery Plan in Italy is the most important one at a European level. And if our National Recovery Plan is going to be successful, then the Next Generation EU is going to be successful. So we need to collaborate with the European Commission, as we have been doing in the past 2 years. So that what the interim report approved by the European Commission a few months ago said that Italy is the country that has reached the largest number of results and is at the forefront compared to other European countries. And I'm saying that because this report has disappeared in the Italian political discourse. This report is not a result of the government, but is a result of what Italy has been doing. However, there are still problems and difficulties in implementing the National Recovery Plan that will continue to exist, and much still has to be done to achieve results. 126 billion euro was the amount allocated in the planning period for 2014-2020. After 9 years, the expenditure accounted for 34%. So there is a problem about expenditure, and we know that very well, but we're doing everything possible to improve that and to provide an effective answer to that problem. Thank you.
Un secondo giro.
A very quick second round. So, cohesion policy means a welfare state. So what do you think about subsidiarity and the participation of intermediate bodies when it comes to this cohesion policy that can also lead to a greater social integration of Europe? So I have recently experienced something like that. So I've seen in a country a person picking up a flyer in favor of Europe, and I see this person putting the flyer down and saying, no, Europe is not for me. Europe is for people taking flights. I could not believe these words, and so I asked this person, what this person meant. So Europe is for those taking flights, so those who are cosmopolitan, travelers, speak several languages. So Europe seems to be for those who want personal mobility. But there are many people that maybe seem not to care. So in the report, I also wrote something thought-provoking. It's not just the freedom to move. This should also mean freedom to stay. So not just the freedom to move around.
Si apre la questione della sussidiarietà.
But also the freedom to stay. This means subsidiarity, because subsidiarity means helping the most vulnerable areas. And the cohesion policy will have to consider that, because those living in centers have more opportunities than those living in suburbs. And so we need to avoid discriminations among people living in centers and those living in peripheral areas. Allow me to say that I'm very optimistic in spite of everything, because Europe went through such difficult times. And I want to say something in favor of Ursula von der Leyen, because something has been somehow silenced. There has never been an EU Commission voted, designated, and confirmed so quickly, in spite of what was said about the EU results of the elections that were largely against Europe. It was not the case. Ursula von der Leyen made a wonderful speech that was very demanding. Personally, I was very happy to hear what she said, because she went back to some chapters of my report For instance, the Union of Investments and Savings. She also referred to the part about the cohesion funds, and also she referred to the proposal of the 28th virtual state. I want to explain it in a few seconds, and I think this is essential, especially to destroy this nationalist fragmentation that we all live in our countries. What do I mean by that? If you ask a small and medium company, and I met many of them around Europe, why don't you fully exploit the single market? They say because the single market exists theoretically and mostly for large companies. Because then you have 27 different fiscal systems, 27 different market laws, and then the different languages. And this is an objective fragmentation. From Slovenia in Croatia, there are two different sort of market laws, and I mean, you can have a huge legal department to manage all that if you're a small and medium company. So the proposal is to create a 28th European virtual state. Why? Because, well, I'm a very practical person. If I said and wrote, let's somehow merge a legal system, that would be totally impossible. Say market laws would be impossible to merge. So let's create a virtual state. So the US have it, is Delaware. So a virtual state with one commercial law. So companies, small and medium companies, can pick their state, and that state with their specific marketing law would be valid all over Europe. So that would be a great option to get rid of bureaucracy and administrative issues. And I consider myself then as a supporter of European sovereignty. This is the only way to give a future to our continent. Otherwise, we will become either a Chinese or an American colony. Thank you. Giorgio, very quickly. I said that more than 4 billion need to come from the market. So this is already a form of subsidiarity. Well, I just want to give one example. I couldn't talk about the digital euro that is pretty important and that responds specifically to the issue we were discussing beforehand. So the fact that in Europe we are 27 national states. Well, we have no unique payment system, so this is a fact. So even if you want to buy something online, I mean, you have no EU payment system because the major credit cards are managed by American companies. So we're thinking about a solution that is somehow in line with our European policy.
L'espertise per utilizzare in maniera.
So we need to see how to create very simple apps. So the European Central Bank will try to do its best to make these tools available to everybody. But for those who have no bank account or have problems in dealing with banks, well, then we need ways to dodge this. But again, there is a great margin of improvement, and I stop there. Well, cohesion policies should fill several gaps. The European Commission studies underscored some critical problems, some critical issues. So certainly we should try to find solutions. There are major gaps between inner areas and urbanized areas, and this is a major criticality. We are areas that are being abandoned, so lacking for enough population. So we really need to find solutions to do something for this. And so when it comes to cohesion policies, we should also consider these problems, because otherwise we really risk to underestimate these huge gaps. In particular, we need to provide practical answers. It's impossible to have development if you don't have essential services of transport, logistics. We need to guarantee connections. Maybe we do not have enough tools to connect some territories with the rest of the world. So how can those territories be interesting, be attractive? So all of these things need to be considered and integrated. So we need certainly to avoid somehow scattering too many small investments. I mean, we need to heavily invest in such areas in a consistent way, and subsidiarity is certainly a key topic. Also, when it comes to the ability to involve more and more public-private partnerships. And this is certainly a key priority for the future. Right, to sum up, I want to wrap up with a reference to politics and social issue. The former governor of the Bank of India said that the future will be state, market, and local areas, all of them being equally important. So we are responsible at all levels. It's not just the small is beautiful, but we need also to believe in what is big, the large projects, the large initiatives, because we need such forms of support. We need to be close to those who risk to feel marginalized. But on the other hand, we need also ways to have largely shared solutions at European level. So certainly we need to deal with these issues at these different levels and aspects. We have talked a lot about subsidiarity, and we have talked about several levels. Next year, we are going to talk about subsidiarity and territorial welfare. And I thank my great guests that certainly we will keep involving in the future, and we will keep investigating and understanding. Thank you very much. and see you very soon. Thank you very much.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Prestare il proprio tempo per il bene comune è un valore prezioso che va sostenuto e tutelato. Da sempre, vicini a enti religiosi e non profit. Contatta subito i nostri agenti.
Vi prego, vi imploro, con umiltà e con fiducia, permettete a Cristo di parlare all'uomo.
Don Gius aveva capito il problema che avevo. Se la tua vocazione è vero, il tuo lavoro verrà fuori anche dai sassi.
Comunicare la fede agli altri, ma veramente insieme a loro riscoprire che cos'è la fede, che cos'è la fede per me. Portare Cristo agli altri, comunicarlo agli altri è l'unico modo che abbiamo per conoscerlo veramente.
L'iter communionis aiuta a comunicare all'esterno la ricchezza di vita, di giudizi, di tentativi, di opere che nascono dalle persone e dalle comunità. L'iter communionis è proprio la vita del movimento. Scrivete all'iter communionis le vostre esperienze, ci fate bene. Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi